Hello and welcome to the first of your grammar lectures. Grammar, the word generally evokes two different responses. It either evokes the response of what is so difficult about grammar? After all, it's a very subjective thing. You read a sentence and try to figure out from the given context what is wrong with the sentence. Or on the other extreme, it evokes the response of grammar can never be mastered. It is so rule driven, there are so many rules to it, it requires a couple of textbooks to be mastered. Neither of this is true. Grammar, when understood properly, is nothing but the structures of the language. You use a lot of words to convey something. The words are structured in a particular format. You create correct sentences using these words, and all of these words or sentences are used to convey a context or a situation in such a manner that both the speaker and the listener understand it the same way, so that there is precision in communication and that there is no ambiguity. Therein exactly comes the whole purpose of grammar testing as far as aptitude exams are concerned. Please understand that you are not an ordinary user of language. You are not a lay person who can use language in any which way that he wants to, as long as he is able to put across some ideas. Nor are you training to be that expert of language for whom it is important to master a couple of grammar books. It is important for him to master all of the structures of language because he is training to be a technical expert of language or a linguist. You are going to be an evolved user of language. What does that mean? As a decision maker, as a manager, your communication is expected to be precise, to the point. And it is all of these areas where the precision of communication is affected, as in the case of a subject-verb disagreement, as in the case of a pronoun that does not have a relevant antecedent, or as in the case of a verb-tense mismatch, as in the case of a parallel structure not maintained, etc. It is in such specific areas that we tend to make errors. And when we make errors here, our communication ends up being open to multiple interpretations and therefore ambiguous. So, precision of communication, expressing something unambiguously, being the need for future leaders like all of you, you will find that most aptitude exams, most competitive exams where people are being filtered out for higher level roles will find that such exams always focus on a few areas of grammar. So it is not the comprehensiveness of the grammar book that is expected of you, but your understanding of specifically those areas where we tend to make errors. Before we get into examining what are these various areas that are tested, let's take an understanding of what is the current weightage given to grammar in all of these aptitude exams. CAT in the last 2 years did not do any direct testing of grammar, whereas in 2014 we did see 5 questions of grammar, and in all the years 2009 to 2013 we saw about 2 or 3 questions of grammar being tested in the 21 questions of verbal format. Does that mean that grammar is no longer relevant? Has it been phased out completely by CAT? One cannot really say anything. Even if it did not appear in the last 2 years, there is always a great possibility that the structure of the language can be tested. Second, one should not forget the relevance of grammar to various other question types. Remember that if you do not relate to the structure of a sentence, if you are not able to understand how correct structuring happens, what is correct usage, etc., you will not really be able to relate to what is being conveyed by, let's say, an RC or a parajumble or a logical continuation question, etc. It's extremely important for you to understand grammar in order to make the relevant connections. Otherwise, you may end up connecting words with different things and being confused. So, even if the CAT did not pose any direct questions of grammar, the other exams did pose plenty of them and continue to do so. The weightage of grammar in IFT verbal sectionals has always been high. You could have anything from a 5 to a 7, 8 questions. The NMAT has always posed a few questions of grammar, 4 or 5 questions of fill in the blanks with the right prepositions, as well as other questions like error detection, etc. What about SNAP or the other exams like ZAT and MyCat and TISNET or CMAT? You will always find a handful of questions of grammar. No verbal ability sectional is free of grammar questions or grammar testing. A SNAP can give you even up to a 7-8 questions. We've seen papers in the past where a 7-8 questions have appeared. In other words, in the entire testing season from the CAT to, let's say, your CMAT or TISNET, you will certainly end up looking at a 30 or 35 to a 60 questions of grammar, which is a lot of weightage to one area or one sectional. Because yes, even if you are looking at a 5-6 questions per test, it does come up to a lot of questions. Not to forget that there can always be a possibility that the CAT chooses to pose you grammar questions again, because just like that summary question type which last appeared in probably the year 2006 or so, suddenly made a reappearance in the year 2014. We didn't see it for those many years from 2006 to 2013, but it made a reappearance. So, you really cannot predict what new question type or what past question type can reappear on these exams. All we can do is be prepared as best as possible for everything. Finally, there is no really segregating grammar from the other 3 components that make for verbal aptitude. And what is that? It is vocabulary, your reading skills, and your understanding of reasoning, logic, or critical reasoning. So, grammar, vocabulary, reading skills, and all of them joined together, brought together by your strong understanding of logic or critical reasoning. This is what makes for verbal aptitude, which means without your control or mastery over any one of these areas, you don't really have verbal aptitude. Having understood this, let's go on to examine how is grammar tested in the various exams. There are 3 major formats, and they are error detection, sentence correction, fill in the blank. What do you mean by error detection? Error detection is a question type where you are simply expected to detect where an error has occurred. It could appear as a set of 4 independent unrelated sentences, one of which has an error or 2 have an error, and therefore there will be options that you need to identify to choose either the correct ones or the incorrect ones. Or you could have 1 or 2 sentences broken into fragments and the fragments placed together, the fragments listed one below the other. You identify which of the fragments has an error or how many are correct, etc. The CAT typically has been giving error detection of this kind, where you have a 2 or 3 sentences broken into fragments and the fragments listed out one below the other. There can also be that one single sentence broken into 4 parts. You are asked to identify which part has an error. Or simply you could have a sentence broken into 4 parts and you are asked to identify how many errors does this sentence contain, how many, which is a rather challenging one. You are actually identifying the number of errors here. Sentence correction takes this a step ahead. You are expected to identify which of the given phrasings of a certain sentence is correct. That is to say, you have a sentence that is presented in 4 different ways. You identify which is the correct phrasing of that sentence, which means you will have to know what is the error in the other places, in the other sentences. Or you could have one part of the sentence underlined and that part phrased in 4 different ways. You identify what is the error in the original and therefore how is it to be corrected. Or you could have a blank given and a part of the statement is given in 4 different ways. In the options you choose the correct part and fill in the blank. Sentence correction is rather challenging because you are not just detecting an error or identifying an error, you are going on to correct it, which requires greater grammar understanding. What is the third kind? The fill in the blank question, seen often on an exam like the NMAT or CMAT. The fill in the blank only poses you a blank in a sentence where you need to use the correct preposition or use the correct conjunction given in the options. There is an unusual variant format which we've seen in exams like the XAT. And what is this format? You have a sentence that is broken into parts, jumbled up, the fragments are actually jumbled up and you are expected to identify the error. How do you do that? By first rearranging the fragments into a coherent, meaningful sentence and then identify the grammatical error. So, error detection, sentence correction, fill in the blanks and this variant kind of the XAT. These are the normal ways in which grammar is tested. You will find the integration of grammar, vocabulary and a little of reasoning in questions that normally are classified under usage. What does that mean? Word usage questions where I may have a word appearing and phrasal verbs or idioms connected with that word are presented in sentences. Or it could even be the use of that word in a particular context. All I'll have to identify is the usage in the phrasal verb sense or the word and an idiom of the word used correctly or incorrectly. Let me give you an example to understand this question type. Take the word hand. Say there are 4 sentences beneath the word hand. The first sentence uses a phrasal verb connected with the word hand. And what's a phrasal verb? It's the combination of a verb with a preposition. So, students are expected to hand in their assignments. That's correct usage. Hand in meaning submit their assignments by evening. The second sentence might say, the manager will hand over the charge or responsibility to the new joinee. Responsibilities, powers, authority is normally handed over. The third one might use an idiom connected with the word hand. Hand in glove. The minister was found to be hand in glove with his bureaucrats. Hand in glove, not literally taken, but has a fixed meaning attached to those words. And what is the fixed meaning? To be hand in glove is to be involved in something secretly done that is illegal, unofficial, a secret, illegal or unofficial activity. The minister was found to be involved with his bureaucrats in something illegal in an underhand manner. The fourth sentence might talk about the legacy was handed to the next generation. Legacies are handed, yes, but handed down, passed down, because things, traditions, heritage normally passes down from the previous generation to the next generation. So, this is an example of a usage question, and usage questions along with the other question types of error detection, sentence correction, etc. are what you will find being tested in the aptitude exams. Now comes the question of what is tested therefore? What are the areas of grammar that are tested? Because yes, we did speak of the fact that I do not need to refer to any grammar book. Why do I not need to refer to any grammar book? Simply because all that you need to know, all the areas that you need to master are put together for you in this series of lectures and modules given to you. What are these areas? Subject-verb agreement, noun-pronoun agreement, verb-tense match or mismatch, parallel structures, modifier errors, mood, particularly subjunctive mood, article usage, prepositional usage, adjectival usage, and a host of miscellaneous things like redundancy, punctuation and spellings, and usage finally. Are these the only areas that you are expected to master? Yes, indeed. But in order for you to master these areas, you may also need to revise and understand thoroughly a few basic concepts. Which is why it comes down to the most important idea that you must keep in mind, that grammar is not contextual. Grammar is always, remember, rule driven. You cannot say that this particular sentence captures a certain context and therefore it has some peculiar grammar being used. No, it doesn't work that way. Language and therefore all our communication has a set of standard rules. So all we need to understand are the rules connected with subject-verb agreement, or the rules connected with conveying a tense and capturing an action or the time of action correctly, the rules connected with parallel structures, the rules connected with article usage, and the mastery of these rules gives me the ability to approach sentences and check for these rules in a very, very algorithmic manner. In other words, I master a set of rules, I look at a sentence and try identifying the rules not used in that sentence or the rules broken in that sentence in a very, very systematic algorithmic manner. Yes, grammar can be quite mathematical when you come to think of it, because it's just a set of rules, a standard set of formula applied to certain sentences. So, this should make your study focused, especially considering that every discussion of theory or concept is going to be followed by a lot of questions that we will solve and apply those rules to. And where are these questions drawn from? Most of these questions that are part of your exercises are drawn from various aptitude exams, exams of the past. We've compiled all of these questions, we've created questions on similar lines, which means your study is very focused, your study and practice is very researched. So, our study of the various grammar topics is also going to be very structured from the point of view of parts of speech. You know what parts of speech are? The basic units of a sentence or the words that are used in a sentence. Before we take that up, so how are our lectures going to be structured, or how is our understanding of grammar going to take place? So we study the various parts of speech and the concepts connected with each of them. For example, let's say we start with nouns. What are the concepts connected with nouns? Noun and pronoun, noun and article usage, and then we move on to verbs. What are the concepts connected with verbs? Tense, voice, mood, conditional tense, verbals, and then I move on to subject-verb agreement, a very, very important area, and then I move on to parallel structures, for which I need to understand conjunctions and parallel structures. I move on to adjectives, adverbs and modifiers, and then prepositions and understanding prepositional testing in phrasal verbs, etc. You see how structured it is. It is a part of speech and the related concepts that we will discuss.